So let's talk about how to get out of a merchant account contract. So the thing here is that it's very important to understand that a lot of merchant account providers, credit card processing companies, they charge actually early termination fees among other fees. So it can be a little complicated to actually get out of a merchant account contract. But in today's conversation, I'll share with you a few tips, a few hacks to really make sure that you have a great strategy out. So let me first talk about the tactics for exiting your contract for free. So canceling a merchant account contract without paying an early termination fee can be one of the most difficult problems a small business owner can face. In fact, most business owners will basically encounter this issue. They are often caught by complete surprise because the cancellation fees was never revealed during the account setup process, aside from a single sentence that is buried in the fine print of a 10 to 20 page service agreement. So it's very important to really go back to your service agreement and read. So the first thing to do is to understand that there basically isn't a guaranteed method for getting out of a merchant account contract without paying a cancellation fee. However, there are tactics that can increase your chances of successfully exiting one of the contracts while providing the providers out of your checking accounts. Okay. Now let's talk about prevention and action first. The thing here is that when we talk about exiting a contract account, you need to understand that it's all about reading. You first need to understand the terms and conditions of the contract you're signing, and then how you can actually protect or let's say cover your companies when it comes to risk management. Okay, and it's really important to understand that first of all, you need to understand that a lot of credit card processors, they are in business to make money. And so if they actually avail you of certain of a certain infrastructure, they are actually expecting you to actually abide by your terms and conditions of the contract. Okay, and it's one of those things where you have to always make sure that you are able to actually comply with the contractual agreements. And if something were to happen, that at least you can cover your butt, if you will. So that's really important. So the first thing is prevention, action. And you have to also read your contract to make sure that you understand all the possible avenues for contract exiting. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. So let's talk about the strategies here. So the first part is prevention, how you got trapped. So, we can't really cover merchant account cancellation without briefly explaining how merchants get themselves into this frustrating situation. And based on our research, and we have researched this for over 20 years, in the majority of cases, the problem stems from 4 mistakes. And I'll talk about those 4 mistakes. So failing to research a provider, trusting an agent's word, not reading the fine prints prior to signing the agreement, and not getting promises in writing. Okay, so let's first talk about the first sort of mistake here, failing to do your research. So if you are a new business owner, get ready to also become a professional researcher. There are actually a vast number of business-to-business products and service companies that want to sell you something. And unfortunately, there are also some very bad seeds in this apple. If you don't carefully research each company you are considering entering into a business with, you run a very good chance of losing a lot of cash. And merchant account providers are no exception to this rule. And most seasoned business owners will tell you that the bad ones take a very big bite. And always search for the best providers for your business before entering into any agreements. Now, what is the cost of that mistake? Well, you could probably pay an early termination fee that goes from $300, in some cases can go all the way to $1,000. So the price can be really steep. So it really makes sense to actually do some research. So mistake number 1, in terms of prevention, failing to do your research. So do your research. Mistake number 2, trusting a sales agent's word. So generally speaking, good companies have good sales agents and vice versa, but never take a sales agent at his or her word. Nearly all merchant account agreements explicitly state that the processor is not required to honor anything the sales agent says or promises. This is usually because the agent is not an actual employee of the company, but instead an authorized reseller who operates independently and is paid solely on commission. So whether it's poor training, ignorance, or malicious intent, agents they constantly fail to verbally disclose important contract terms and fees. In fact, some will knowingly lie just to get a merchant to sign an agreement quickly. So even if the agent is a family member or close friends, you are playing with fire if you make your decision on the basis of a conversation alone. By the way, boss, welcome back. I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about how to get out of a merchant account contract. The third mistake that you need to really avoid here is failing to read the fine prints. I mean, the fine prints can be a little complicated. You have a lot of legal lingo, but hey, listen, it's really important to read the fine prints. Always read a merchant account contract before signing. It sounds like common sense, but a large percentage of unhappy merchants find themselves in a bad situation because they disregarded this cardinal rule. So when you take the time to read the fine print, you will most likely encounter terms and conditions that were not disclosed or that really caused confusion. So keep notes as you read and get clarifications if you have questions. Keep in mind that many merchant account agreements are up to 60 to 90 pages long, even though the signature portion may only be on the first or second page of the application. So bad agents will sometimes forget, quote unquote, forget to hand over the pages with the fine print. So be sure you have the whole documents before signing. This is very important. Again, if you do not do this, you are going to pay anywhere from $300 all the way to $1,000 in early termination fees. And the fourth mistake here is failing to get promises in writing. So if an agent or a representative of the company makes a promise to you that contradicts a condition of the contract, get it in writing. This is really important. If the agent is independent, getting writing from both the agent and the company. Make sure the agent's written promise states that they will personally be held responsible. Remember, independent agents can assign obligations on behalf of the processor because they do not actually work for the processor. So you need to be able to go after the agents personally if they do not deliver. So such promises may be for things like waiving a service agreement's length or ETF, or paying an ETF of another processor if you sign with them. And it may also be for reimbursement of equipment or waiving of other fees such as the despised PCI compliance fee. If you have it in writing, you now have recourse against both the agent and the company should they not deliver on the end of the bargain. So it's one of those things where, when we talk about contractual agreements, sometimes things may not go along the way like how you expected them. So you got to have a recourse. This is why you got to have it in writing. If you have it in writing, at least you have some kind of written recourse to sort of go after them either the court or through arbitration. Now, let's talk about canceling merchant accounts without paying a fee. So in the first part, I just spoke to you about prevention, right? So the 4 mistakes you need to avoid. Now, let's talk about canceling a merchant account without paying a fee. Now, first of all, you got to prepare for a fight. This is really important because basically, when we talk about early termination fee, sometimes that fee is called deconversion fee. And please note that the tactics I will be sharing with you are not really legal advice. Those are those are hacks that we have learned over the years and based from our own clients, but also from what we have seen in the industry. First of all, you need to understand your termination policy. And the thing is that if you are going out of business, for instance, you want to make sure that you understand that you can qualify for a waiver of the early termination fee. Okay, you have to understand that some contracts have conditions to waive the fee under such circumstances. Be sure to reference your agreement to find any provisions that allow you to terminate service without an ETF. Keep in mind that even if you find provisions that allow you to cancel without an ETF, it doesn't mean that a processor will automatically waive your fee. Therefore, you may want to prepare for an ETF by taking the following steps before canceling your service, okay? And the thing is that, first of all, this is one of those reasons why you want to read your termination policy from A to Z. You got to read all the pages in that termination policy to clearly understand what's really happening here. And you should be looking for those scenarios that call for a waiver, such as bankruptcy, for instance, or if you have liquidation, for instance, you have all kinds of scenarios that can be in that document. Now, should you close your attached checking account? This is actually another tactic also. So when you signed up for your merchant accounts, you likely granted the processor access to your checking accounts. Most often, this is done so that your sales can be deposited from your merchant account into your checking accounts. But once a provider has ACH access, they can also make withdrawals without prior notice. So the thing is that it's one of those things where you have to really ask yourself, are you able to close your attached checking accounts? How many transactions do you have to run through that account? Because basically this is not the primary business account or the secondary account, and then you need to keep it open. So you need to make a decision whether or not it makes sense for you operationally and legally and financially speaking to keep the attached checking accounts open. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about how to get out of a merchant account contract. It's important to understand that if you keep your checking accounts, your attached checking accounts open, the processor may charge you instantly. Okay. And so early termination fees are almost always automatically debited from a merchant's attached checking accounts the moment they cancel service. The only way to prevent a processor from drafting a disputed fee from you is to cancel your checking accounts and notify the bank that you do not authorize any further transactions from it. Keep in mind, though, that you should pay any legitimate outstanding fees owed to the provider, such as remaining processing fees, because the processor has a legal right to collect them. And there may be stiff consequences. This is really important to understand. So closing your checking accounts will keep a provider from electronically collecting remaining fees while you fight an ETF, but doing so can set you up for other headaches. For instance, there are countless stories from business owners about being threatened with lawsuits, credit score damage, or getting sent to collections after closing a checking accounts and refusing to pay an ETF. So even worse, some business owners report getting placed on the terminated merchant file, a highly unethical tactic, which can make it impossible to get a merchant account with another provider. Okay, so that's called the terminated merchant file, the TMF. So it's up to you to decide if the fight is worth the risk. So basically, the point I'm trying to make here is that if the early termination fee is, say, $300 or $400, you got to ask yourself, if I close the account, what's the cost, right? And is the whole thing worth $400? Is the whole thing worth $300? You have to see. In our experience, it's never the case. It's never the case. It's sad to say this way, but it's better to pay the fee than actually being placed, for instance, on the TMF. Because if you are on the TMF, this is really, really bad for your future revenue generation. Okay, TMF, once again, terminated merchant file. Another strategy you can really think about is to build a case for a free exit. So first, you want to check your last 3 months statement to see if any of your fees have been raised. Many state laws and many contracts say that if your fees have been raised during your service agreements, you can cancel actually with no penalty for a defined grace period, usually 30 to 90 days. So this is kind of cool. And if you recently signed up with the provider and want to cancel because you were deceived by an agent regarding the cost of the services, gather any supporting evidence that proves that you were misled about pricing or cancellation terms. Okay. And, so this is important, but you can also try to negotiate. See, the whole thing is that you can actually win. It's really funny, but when it comes to early termination fees, a lot of merchants think about fighting, or they are constantly on defense. But if you were to really think a little bit about being courteous, having negotiation skills can really help you out. Prepare to be courteous. The person on the other line is a human being and is more likely to help you if you are friendly and treat them with respect, okay? Remember, you signed the contract and may have little to no legal leverage. And so get your sales rep or account manager involved, for instance. So getting the agent who set up your account involved can solve a lot of problems. In some cases, the agent actually makes the final call on whether or not the ETF should be charged. If the agent values your relationship and has any influence in the matter, they may be able to get it waived or reimbursed for you. If the agent can't or won't help you and is basically an independent contractor, not most are, then you may have an additional legal route for recovering your fee if you believe that he or she intentionally misled you. And the thing here is that as an independent contractor, what we have seen in our research is that an agent will act as his or her own business and can be held accountable for illegal sales and marketing tactics. So if you believe that you have a case, you may consider taking legal action directly against the agent, not against the processor. Okay, so it's one of those things where you may want to go the diplomatic route to see if you can really save your file or save your case and really avoid the nearly the $200, $300, $400, or $500, or even $1,000 ETF. The last thing you want to try to do here is to make a case. The whole thing is most providers require written notification of cancellation. If you have documentation that proves or suggests that your ETF should be waived, so you want to submit copies along with your cancellation notice. Be sure to get confirmation that your cancellation notice has been received. Your cancellation letter should provide an explanation of why your ETF should be waived in reference to the supporting documents. And be clear here, because the thing is that a lot of credit card payment processors, when you are about to exit the account, they just automatically think about the ETF. So for them to actually reverse that the ETF sort of stance, you need to be really, really persuasive. Okay. Now you can try to reverse the fee. So if a disputed ETF has already been debited from your checking accounts, get your bank involved. Many banks will reverse the charge if you report it as an unauthorized. However, if the bank where you keep your checking accounts has also provided your merchant account, this tactic may be fruitless. And this happened, for instance, if you have a Chase, because Chase does have a credit card processing arm. So once you have successfully reversed a fee, it's probably a good idea to close the checking account and open a new one. Or you can try to threaten public complaints and official reports. So if a processor is refusing to waive or reimburse a disputed ETF, there are a few places that you can file complaints that will get a merchant account provider's attention. And so this is really what it is. And one thing I want to say here is that you want to really think deep before you go that route, because if you were to sully, if you were to tarnish a processor's good name, you probably indirectly or directly tarnishing your own name too. So it's one of those things where we do not advise our clients or our viewers to go that route. But hey, listen, you're totally your own man or your own woman. You know what really will work for you. So you have to see whether or not it really makes sense. So bottom line here is what? Merchant account early termination fees often seem unethical, but despite their questionable nature, they are legal in most cases. Your best chance of avoiding an ETF is to eliminate it prior to setting up an account. For those who are already stuck in this unfortunate situation, preparation and courteous attitude can make all the difference. In the event that a processor will not budge, official reports, public complaints, and renegotiation may get the job done. Okay, so it's one of those things where you are in an active position as opposed to a passive situation. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I just spoke to you about how to get out of a merchant account contract. So I gave you the pro tips, the strategies, and the strategies actually revolved around preparation and negotiation. Thank you so much for your attention. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.